Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. I hope all of you are doing great. So today I'll be showing you some camping and hiking photos with disturbing backstories. Each year, a lot of people go into the woods seeking solitude and peace, far away from the constant pressure of society and just to enjoy the nature. And a lot of the times nothing bad happens and everyone just returns safely. But there are times where terrible things happen and the journey expected to be relaxing becomes a living nightmare. In this video, we'll explore seemingly ordinary and final photos from camping trips and hikes, each one hiding a chilling backstory. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. In the early morning of June 25th, 1974, Marietta Jaeger sat by the phone waiting. She had been told she would receive a call, and she was desperate to hear the voice on the other end. Exactly 1 year earlier, her worst nightmare had come true. Her daughter had been taken. Marietta checked the tape recorder in her bag to make sure it was working. The FBI had given it to her, and she needed it to record every word of the call. She sat up in bed, praying her daughter was still alive. If she was, investigators needed every clue they could get. Finally, around 2 a.m., the phone rang. Marietta took a deep breath, turned on the recorder, and picked up the phone. She was ready to talk to the man who had taken her daughter, ready to do anything to bring her home. This horror had started on a beautiful summer day in June 1973. Marietta, her husband Bill, and their 5 children were on a month-long camping trip across the country. They had left their home in Detroit, Michigan, and traveled to Missouri Headwaters State Park in Montana. That evening, Marietta's parents joined them around the campfire. Later, everyone went to sleep, Marietta and Bill in their truck, the boys and grandparents in campers, and the 2 youngest girls, 7-year-old Susie and 13-year-old Heidi, in a tent. In the middle of the night, Heidi woke up to a strange sound. She saw a large hole cut into the side of the tent and Susie was gone. Terrified, Heidi ran to her parents. At first, Marietta and Bill thought Susie had wandered off. But when they searched and couldn't find her, they called the police. Police in the small town of Manhattan, Montana, didn't deal with kidnappings often. At first they thought Susie might have gotten lost, but then they found footprints leading from the tent to a parking lot proving someone had taken her. As the hours passed, hope faded. Investigators believed Susie had been killed the same night she was taken. They searched the river and woods but found nothing. Then a chilling detail came up. 5 years earlier in the same park, a 12-year-old Boy Scout named Michael Rainey had been stabbed to death in his tent. The killer was never caught. Was the same person responsible for both crimes? A week after Susie vanished, a man called the home of one of the officers working the case. He claimed to have Susie and demanded $50,000 for her return. To prove he was the kidnapper, he described a small deformity on Susie's fingernails. Something only family knew. Bill was sure the caller was telling the truth. Police tried to trace the call, but with 1970s technology, they couldn't succeed. The kidnapper never called back. Marietta refused to give up. She handed out flyers and kept Susie's face in the news. The FBI set up a tap on her phone, hoping the kidnapper would call again. Then in 1974, another tragedy struck. A 19-year-old woman named Sandra Mullen disappeared in Montana. Her remains were later found in a steel drum. Investigators wondered, was this the same killer? The FBI's new criminal profiling team studied the case. They believed the kidnapper was a young white man, familiar with the area, likely ex-military and obsessed with his victims. One name kept coming up, David Mehrhofer, a local man who had been questioned early on. He was polite, but something about him didn't add up. The FBI believed the kidnapper would call Marietta on the 1-year anniversary of Susie's disappearance, and they were right. On June 25, 1974, the phone rang. A man calling himself Mr. Travis claimed he had taken Susie. He played a recording of a child's voice, but Marietta knew it wasn't Susie. Then the man slipped up and mentioned something only David would know. The call was traced to a hotel in Utah, but David was gone. Police finally arrested David. When they searched his home, they found a nightmare, bloody sheets, and a severed hand in his freezer. The hand belonged to Sandra Mullen. David confessed to killing 4 people: Bernard Pullman, a boy who was playing in the woods in 1967, Michael Rainey, the Boy Scout stabbed in his tent in 1968, Susie Jaeger, kidnapped and murdered in 1973, and Sandra Mullen, killed after rejecting him in 1974. He admitted he had strangled Susie, then burned her body. David avoided the death penalty by confessing, but hours later he died in his cell. The case never went to trial. Cowden family, Siskiyou Mountains, Oregon, 1974. In 1974, during the Labor Day weekend, a young family from White City, Oregon, decided to take a last-minute camping trip. Richard Cowden was 28 years old and worked as a truck driver. He was married to Belinda, who was 22. They had 2 children, 5-year-old David and 5-month-old Melissa. The family also had a basset hound dog named Droopy. Originally, Richard had planned to spend the long weekend working on their driveway by hauling gravel, but when the truck he needed broke down, he changed his plans. Instead, the Cowdens packed their things and went camping in the Siskiyou Mountains near a place called Carberry Creek in Copper, Oregon. It was a spot they had visited before and liked. They arrived on August 30th and parked their old 1956 Ford truck near the campground. Everything seemed normal. On Sunday, September 1st around 9 a.m., Richard and little David walked to a nearby store to buy some milk. They bought it and then left to return to their campsite. Sadly, that was the last time anyone saw them alive. Later that day, Belinda's mother became worried when the family didn't show up for dinner. She only lived about a mile from the campsite, so she drove there to check on them. What she found was strange and very worrying. The truck was still there. The keys were on the picnic table, along with Belinda's purse. Clothes were inside the truck, but the family's bathing suits were missing. A baby's diaper bag and a dishpan full of cold water were left nearby. Even the half-full milk carton Richard and David had bought was still on the table. Belinda's cigarettes, Richard's wallet, and his watch were also just lying there. But there was no sign of the family. After searching for about an hour, Belinda's mother called the police. Officers arrived quickly and searched the area until it got dark. One state trooper later said the campsite felt very eerie. Even the milk was still on the table, he said. At first, the police didn't think anything violent had happened. This caused a delay in the investigation, maybe by a full day. But early the next morning, the family dog Droopy was found scratching at the door of the same store Richard had visited the day before. The search for the Cowdens became large. Hundreds of people helped, including the National Guard, local volunteers, scouts, and forest workers. They searched over 25 miles of trails and roads, using planes and special cameras that could detect heat. But nothing was found. The search officially ended on September 7th. Police were confused. The Cowdens had no reason to leave their campsite. They were doing well in life, and there was no sign that they had been robbed. Everything valuable was still at the scene. There were also no signs of a fight and no clues to suggest they were kidnapped. The police interviewed many people and even offered a reward of $2,000 for information. Richard's sister wrote a letter to the local newspaper asking hunters to be on the lookout for anything strange, even freshly dug ground. Still nothing turned up. The FBI did not get involved because there was no proof of kidnapping or foul play. At the same time, other women had gone missing in Oregon and Washington, but those cases were later linked to serial killer Ted Bundy. Then in April 1975, 7 months later, 2 men searching for gold found something terrible. In the woods about 7 miles from the Cowden campsite, they discovered a man's body tied to a tree. Nearby, inside a small cave covered with rocks, were the bodies of a woman, a child, and a baby. They were Richard, Belinda, David, and Melissa. Autopsies showed that Belinda and David had been shot with a .22 caliber gun. Baby Melissa had been hit on the head. Richard's cause of death could not be confirmed, but police believed he died near the tree, while the others were killed somewhere else. No gun was ever found, so the idea that Richard had harmed his family and then himself was ruled out. Police believed the family may have gone swimming after buying the milk and were then forced at gunpoint to leave with someone. They were likely taken up the hill and killed there. One family visiting from California said they saw 2 men and a woman in a truck at the campground that day. The people looked like they were waiting for others to leave, and the visitors felt so uneasy that they quickly left. This sighting made police think the killer knew the area well, especially since the cave where the bodies were hidden wasn't easy to find. There was only one real suspect in the case. His name was Dwayne Lee Little. He had a dark past. In 1964, he was sent to prison for the murder of a 15-year-old girl. He was let out on parole in May 1974, just months before the Cowden family disappeared. Police learned that Dwayne was in the area during Labor Day weekend. His girlfriend said she saw him with a .22 caliber gun later that year. His parole was taken away in January 1975, and he was sent back to prison. Then in 1977, he was let out again and attacked a pregnant woman. She and her baby survived, and he was given 3 life sentences for the attack. Though Dwayne never admitted to the Cowden murders, one of his cellmates said he had confessed. A miner nearby also claimed Dwayne and his parents had visited his cabin and signed his guest book the day after the Cowdens vanished. Police suspected that the people seen in the truck by the California family were Dwayne and his parents, but the Little family denied any connection. Sadly, there was never enough evidence to charge Dwayne with the murders. The case remains open, and no one has ever been arrested. A few months after the murders, Richard's father took his own life, but police did not believe he was involved. To this day, the Cowden family's death is one of the most tragic and mysterious cases in Oregon's history. Even after all these years, the questions still remain. Why did this happen, and who really did it? Charles McCullar, Crater Lake National Park, Oregon, 1975. Crater Lake National Park is a beautiful place in Oregon, known for its deep blue lake, mountains, and forests. Many people visit the park each year to enjoy nature, but over the years some strange things have happened there. One of the most puzzling stories is about a young man named Charles McCullar who went missing in 1975. Charles was only 19 years old. He loved taking photos and had planned a big trip to visit national parks across the United States. He wanted to take pictures of the natural beauty during the winter season. In late January 1975, Charles was staying with a friend in Eugene, Oregon. He told his friend that he was going to Crater Lake to take pictures, and that if he didn't come back by February 1st, the police should be called. Charles left for Crater Lake on January 29th. At the time, the park was already covered in deep snow. People later said that Charles was not dressed properly for cold weather and didn't have the right gear for such a trip. A person later said they had given Charles a ride to the entrance of the park. This was the last time anyone saw him. More snow fell on January 31st, making it even harder to travel in the area. When Charles did not return on February 1st, his friend kept his promise and told the police. A search was quickly started by the National Park Service and the state police. They put out notices and asked the public for help. When Charles's parents found out he was missing, his father went to the park many times to help with the search. He gave the park rangers a list of things Charles had with him, including clothes and gear. But even with all their efforts, the search did not find anything. There were no signs of Charles anywhere. Eventually, the search was called off because there were no leads. Over a year passed with no news. Then in October 1976, a group of hikers was walking far from the usual paths in Crater Lake National Park. They came across a backpack and a scarf lying in the snow. Something about the scene felt strange, so they took a few items from the backpack and went to report it to the park rangers. One of the rangers they spoke to was named Marion Jack. He had helped with the original search for Charles. When he saw the items the hikers had found, he realized they matched the list Charles's father had given them. Marion asked the hikers to draw a map showing where they had found the backpack. He and another ranger rode horses to the spot. They found the backpack right where the hikers said it would be. As they looked around more, they found something very odd. Lying on the ground was a pair of pants. The pants looked a little worn, but were still mostly in good shape. The strange thing was that the pants were lying in a crumpled pile as if someone had taken them off and left them there. The belt was undone and the zipper was open. Inside the pants they found a broken leg bone and some small bones still inside the socks. But they did not find Charles's boots, camera, or knife, items that should have been close by. Not far from the pants, they found a skull turned upside down. It was not damaged. The area was searched carefully, but no other large bones were found. The Rangers took the skull and told the FBI about what they had found. The authorities later confirmed that the bones were Charles's. But in the end, they said it was a tragic accident and did not investigate further. Still, there are many questions that were never answered. How did Charles end up so far from the main trails, especially with all the deep snow? Why would he go to such a lonely and hard-to-reach place? It's also strange that his pants were left in a neat pile with bones inside them, but many other bones were missing. And why were his boots and other items not found nearby? Some people believe that Charles might have had an accident and broken his leg, which made it impossible for him to get help. Missing shoes or boots are actually common in many cases of people who go missing in nature. No one really knows why. And in Charles's case, the missing camera and knife also make the situation more confusing. Animals may move bones, but they wouldn't take a camera or knife. Charles's parents believed that someone hurt their son. They thought he was the victim of foul play. But the park rangers and the FBI said they didn't find any proof of that. In the end, there was not enough evidence to know for sure what happened. It's sad and puzzling. What happened to him in the snowy forest of Crater Lake may never be fully known. Trenny Gibson, Great Smoky Mountains, Tennessee, 1976. Trenny Lynn Gibson was born on August 17, 1960. She grew up in Knoxville, Tennessee, with her parents, Robert Sr. and Hope, her brother Robert Jr., and her sister Tina. The family lived on Widow Road. Trenny was a student at Bearden High School and also worked at a cafeteria in a local mall. She dreamed of going to the University of Tennessee to study landscape design because she loved plants. On Friday, October 8, 1976, Trenny's high school horticulture class had a field trip. The students didn't know where they were going. Their teacher, Mr. Wayne Dunlap, only told them the destination after they got on the bus. He said they were heading to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. This park is very large and has many forests, trails, and mountains. That day the weather was cold and rainy. Trenny wasn't dressed for the weather. She wore a blue and white sweater, a blouse, jeans, and sneakers. She also wore a diamond ring and a sapphire necklace. Robert Simpson, a senior student and a friend of her brother, gave her his plaid wool jacket to keep her warm. When the bus reached the park around noon, Mr. Dunlap gave the students instructions. They were to hike on the Forney Ridge Trail to a place called Andrews Bald, then turn around and come back. The whole walk was about 3.6 miles. They were told to look at the plant life, but not to leave the trail. They needed to be back at the bus by 3:30 p.m. The students began the hike at 12:30 p.m. They split into groups walking at different speeds. Trenny and Robert walked together to Andrews Bald. After eating lunch, Trenny wanted to go back, but Robert stayed behind. So Trenny walked back alone. Along the trail, Trenny caught up with a few other students. After a short time with them, she moved ahead. Some students who were resting invited her to sit with them, but she kept going. Not long after, these students saw her crouching near the side of the trail, as if looking at something. At around 2:50 p.m., Trenny walked off the right side of the trail. A student noticed there was no real path where she had gone, just thick plants, rocks, and a small stream. They called her name, but got no answer. Another student came by and said he hadn't seen her either. They assumed she had gone ahead to the bus. By 3:30 p.m., all students except Trenny were back at the bus. Robert Simpson explained she had left before him. He said he had gone to track a bear. Mr. Dunlap and one student went to look for her but couldn't find her. At 4:03 p.m., he called the park rangers to report Trenny missing. Help arrived around 4:30 p.m. and the bus returned to the school while the search began. By 6:30 p.m., many volunteers joined the search, but the weather was terrible. It was raining hard, foggy, and windy. At the spot where Trenny had last been seen, they found cigarette butts and a half-full beer can. Tracking dogs followed her scent to the top of Klingman's Dome, near an observation tower. Then, they tracked it to a road 1.6 miles away called Collins Gap. More cigarette butts were found there. The search continued for weeks but found nothing. It officially ended on November 1st, 1976. Later searches in 1977 and 1981 also failed. Sadly, no trace of Trenny has ever been found. Many people believe Trenny did not run away. She left her purse and clothes at home, and she had money in the bank that was never touched. She had no way to know where the field trip was going ahead of time, since even the students didn't know until they were on the bus. Her mother had driven her to school that day, and Trenny went straight to the bus. It doesn't seem like she planned anything. She had even asked her mother to come on the trip as a chaperone, but her mother couldn't get off work. There was also an earlier incident in 1975. A boy named Kevin Bowman tried to break into Trenny's house and was shot in the foot by her mom. He later said he wanted to hurt Trenny. He was arrested and sent to juvenile detention. But at the time Trenny disappeared, he was in class and had an alibi. Some people were suspicious of Robert Simpson. He was the last person to see Trenny before she walked off alone. Trenny always carried a special comb, and it was later found in Robert's car. He said she gave it to him. He also made a strange comment about her possibly running off with a man. Still, no one saw him go past the other students, so he probably wasn't near her when she vanished. There was also a story that another girl at school had Trenny's ring and necklace. These were gifts Trenny treasured. The girl promised to return them, but never did. It's unclear how she got them, and it's not known if this really happened. If true, it could be important. There are two main ideas about what might have happened to Trenny. One is that she got lost after leaving the trail, possibly trying to take a shortcut. She may have died from the cold weather. If animals disturbed her remains, searchers might never have found her. The other idea is that she walked to the road and was picked up by someone, either by choice or against her will. The matching cigarette butts suggest someone was waiting. Still, it's hard to explain how they would know where she'd be. In the end, the mystery remains unsolved and her family never got the answers. Stacey, Arras, Yosemite National Park, California, 1981. This story takes us back to the summer of 1981. A 14-year-old girl named Stacey Arras went on a guided tour in Yosemite National Park in California. She had blonde hair that she styled in the popular Farrah Fawcett look. She had braces on both her top and bottom teeth. Not long before the trip, she had even gone to prom with her boyfriend. Stacey was on the trip with her father George and 6 other people. They were going on a 4-day tour through Yosemite's backcountry. 2 guides were with them. The group traveled on horseback along the High Sierra Loop Trail and arrived at their campsite on the afternoon of Friday, July 17th. The camp had 9 tent cabins and could hold up to 34 people. After they arrived, the group planned to relax for the rest of the day. Stacey decided to go explore. She changed into a t-shirt, a light jacket, maroon and white shorts, and flip-flops. She took her camera with her. She asked her dad to come, but he said no and told her she should wear hiking boots instead. Some reports say she stayed in her flip-flops, while others say she changed into boots. Along with her camera, Stacey carried a pack of gum and some cigarettes. She walked toward a nearby lake. An older man from the group, Jaryd, who was in his 70s, walked with her for 20 to 30 minutes before stopping to rest. Stacey kept going alone. A tour guide later said he saw Stacey standing on a rock about 50 yards from the trail. If she was heading to Sunrise Lake, it was only a mile away. She would have reached it in less than an hour. Sunrise Lake is beautiful and easy to get to by following the trail. Other lakes on the map likely would have been dried up during the summer. Later that day, another group of hikers arrived at the campsite. The group asked them if they had seen Stacey, but they had not. Stacey's father, the guides, and staff from the camp began to search. They looked through the night and called park rangers for help. The next day, an official search began. About 100 people helped. Some were volunteers, others were paid. The search area was 5 square miles, based on the idea of how far Stacey could have walked. The land had many cliffs, rivers, and rough terrain. 3 helicopters helped with the search, which lasted 11 days. The effort cost around $55,000 back then, which would be about $180,000 today. Despite all this work, Stacey was never found. At the time, temperatures in the area could reach 90 Fahrenheit during the day and drop to 47 Fahrenheit at night. Stacey was wearing shorts and a light jacket, so the cold nights would have been very hard for her. One person even brought a German shepherd to help track her, but no clues were found. Bloodhounds, which are better at tracking a specific scent, were never used. Cadaver dogs, which can find human remains even many years later, were also not brought in. Stacey's family still has no answers. Many people believe the Park Service missed a big opportunity by not using every tool available, even in later years. Cadaver dogs were already being used by police in the 1980s. There are also confusing details in this case. Some reports say that Stacey's camera lens cap was found near the lake, but park officials later said that nothing at all was found. If the lens cap was found, it would prove that Stacey made it to the lake. If not, then many reports were simply wrong. There is also confusion about Jaryd, the last person to see Stacey. His age was listed differently in several reports, and his name wasn't shared with the public until much later. There's no proof that he did anything wrong, but the lack of clear information makes people wonder how carefully the case was handled. After the search ended, missing posters were put up around the park. Officials ruled out the idea that Stacey ran away. They said she may have had some problems at school or at home, but nothing serious. She had invited her dad and another person to walk with her, which doesn't sound like someone planning to disappear. The National Park Service hasn't been very open with information. Most of what has been released are photos, posters, and short news articles. There are documents that show investigators looked at who was in the park at the time using hiking permits, but we don't know what they found. Reporters and researchers have tried to get more documents using something called the Freedom of Information Act, but their requests were denied. The government said that sharing the records could affect law enforcement work, even though Stacey has been missing for over 40 years. The U.S. government does not keep an official count of people who go missing in national parks. Experts say about 1,600 people disappear while visiting parks across the country. That's a big number for something the government doesn't track. Some people think wild animals could have attacked Stacey. Yosemite has bears, coyotes, bobcats, mountain lions, and rattlesnakes. But if an animal had attacked her, there would have been signs: blood, clothing, bones, or her camera. Since nothing was found, this seems unlikely. Another idea is that she slipped or fell somewhere hard to see. Yosemite has cliffs and deep cracks in the ground. Still, with so many people searching, you would think they'd have found her. If cadaver dogs had been used, they might have. Finally, some people wonder if something strange or even supernatural happened. After all, Stacey disappeared without a trace. In the end, no one knows what really happened to Stacey Arras. Her family still doesn't have answers. David Shearing and the Wells Gray Park Murders, British Columbia, 1982. In August 1982, a family of 6 went on a camping trip in Wells Gray Park, one of the biggest parks in British Columbia, Canada. They were excited for their 2-week vacation, fishing, hiking, and spending time together in nature. But they never came home. Bob Johnson, his wife Jackie, and their 2 daughters, Janet, 13, and Karen, 11, had packed their car and driven to meet Jackie's parents, Edith and George Bentley. The Bentleys had brought their new camper with a small boat on top. When Bob didn't show up for work after 2 weeks, his boss knew something was wrong. Bob was reliable. He wouldn't just disappear. Soon, police realized the whole family was missing, along with their car and the Bentley's camper. A huge search began, but no one could find them. It was like they had vanished. A month later, a man picking mushrooms in the woods found something terrible. A burnt car hidden deep in the forest. Inside were 4 bodies, burned so badly they were almost unrecognizable. They were Bob, Jackie, Edith, and George. When police opened the trunk, they found the remains of Janet and Karen. All 6 had been shot with a .22 caliber rifle. Someone had killed them, put them in the car, and set it on fire to hide the evidence. The family was devastated. Kelly, the girl's cousin, remembered her mother crying, saying, "They're all dead, all 6 of them." The remains were so badly burned that they all fit into a tiny baby's casket. Police searched for the missing camper, but couldn't find it. They did find the campsite where the murders happened. Shell casings from a .22 caliber rifle, beer bottles, and sticks used for roasting marshmallows. They made a fake camper just like the Bentleys and drove it across Canada, hoping someone would remember seeing it. But no one came forward. Then, over a year later, forest rangers found the burnt camper on a hidden road near the crime scene. Now, police knew the killer was someone local. Only a local would know that road. Police got thousands of tips, but one name kept coming up: David Shearing, a local man with a criminal past. His family lived near the crime scene, and he owned a .22 caliber rifle. When police first questioned him, they didn't suspect him, but now, with so many tips, they arrested him. At first, David only admitted to a hit-and-run accident, but under pressure, he confessed to the murders. He said he had seen the family camping, stalked them, and then shot all 4 adults first. But he lied about what happened next. After his sentencing, 6 life sentences, the lead investigator, Sergeant Eastham, confronted David. He believed David had done something worse to the girls. Finally, David admitted the truth. He had kept Janet and Karen alive for days after killing their family. He took them to his cabin, where he sexually assaulted Janet. Karen was just there. He didn't care about her. A week later, he took them into the woods, told them to turn around, and shot them in the back of the head. Then he burned their bodies in the car. David Shearing, who later changed his name to David Ennis, never showed real remorse. In prison, he even got married to a woman named Heather, who believed he had changed. Over the years, he kept applying for parole, but each time, the parole board refused. They said he was still dangerous. In 2021, over 100,000 people signed a petition to keep him locked up. Janet's childhood friend, Tammy, said, "He is still the same sick, brutal monster he was in 1982. The families of the victims still remember the horror. Bob's brother Art said, "What he did to those 2 little girls, that's the part that tears you apart." David Shearing may have changed his name, but he can't change what he did. As of now, David Ennis remains imprisoned and continues to serve his life sentence without parole. German tourists, Death Valley National Park, California, 1996. On October 21, 1996, at around 11 a.m., a park ranger named Dave Brenner was flying a helicopter over Death Valley National Park. He was looking for illegal drug labs as part of his regular patrol. While flying, he saw something unusual, a van parked in a very remote area called Anvil Canyon. This was not just any van. It was a normal passenger van, the kind people use to drive around cities. But it was parked in a place where no regular roads existed. Even more strange, there was no way such a van could have reached that deep into the canyon without getting stuck. Ranger Brenner landed his helicopter near the van and went to take a look. The van was stuck in some mud, and 3 of its tires were flat. It was covered in sand, showing it had been there for a while. After checking the license plate, they found out that the van had been rented from Dollar Rent-A-Car in Los Angeles. It had been rented on July 8th by 4 German tourists. It was supposed to be returned by July 26, but it never was. Because the rental company has a rule that any car not returned in 30 days is considered stolen, they had reported it as a stolen vehicle. Police checked the names on the rental agreement. The people who rented the van were Egbert Rimkus, 34, his son Georg Weber, 11, Egbert's girlfriend Cornelia Meyer, 28, and her son Max Meyer, 4. They had all come from Frankfurt, Germany. They arrived in Seattle on July 8th, then flew straight to Los Angeles, where they picked up the van. They had return plane tickets for July 27th, but they never showed up at the airport. Photos from their camera showed that they spent the first few days sightseeing in Southern California. On July 12th, Egbert called his bank in Germany and asked for $1,500 to be sent to a bank in San Clemente, but the money ended up at a branch in Los Angeles. After that, they traveled to Las Vegas and stayed at the Treasure Island Hotel. On July 22nd, they checked out and planned to visit Yosemite National Park, but first made a stop at Death Valley. A visitor center in Death Valley confirmed that someone bought 2 German-language guidebooks that day. One of those books was later found inside the van. The day after the van was discovered, a team of investigators arrived to take pictures and check the scene. There were no other footprints or tire tracks, only those from the van. Inside, they found clothes, luggage, beer bottles, a leather wallet, a camera, and sleeping bags. They also found an American flag labeled Boot Valley Stone Cabin, a place also known as the Geologist's Cabin. This cabin was about 4 miles from the van, meaning the family had probably stayed there before the van got stuck. After investigating, the van was removed from the canyon. A large search for the family began on October 23rd. Many search and rescue teams joined, including people on horseback and professional trackers. They searched Anvil Canyon, Butte Valley, and Warm Springs Canyon, but found very little. One clue they did find was a beer bottle about 1.7 miles from the van. It matched the bottles found inside the van. Next to it was a place that looked like someone had sat down. This suggested that someone had walked away from the van and stopped to rest there. Many people continued to search over the years. One man named Dick Hasselman claimed he found more clues, like German canteens and a sleeping bag found earlier by a ranger. But because these were never confirmed, we don't know for sure if they were connected to the family. Some people thought Egbert wanted to disappear and start a new life. His ex-wife said he had custody problems with his son, and a co-worker said Egbert had talked about moving to Costa Rica. But it didn't make sense. Cornelia had a business in Germany, and they had return tickets. Another theory claimed that Egbert was trying to spy on a secret government base nearby, but this idea seemed unlikely and too far-fetched. After the first searches, the case stayed quiet for many years. In 2008, a man named Tom Mahood found the story online and became interested. He spent months talking to others and looking at all the facts. He came up with a theory that matched everything that was known. Tom believed that the family may not have brought enough money. That's why Egbert asked for more to be sent. They entered Death Valley and started down a rough road. Then they made a mistake and turned onto an even worse road. Still, they kept going. They reached the geologist's cabin and stayed there, but later decided to keep driving. That was their second mistake. Eventually, they tried to drive over a very rough trail with no real road. The van's tires went flat, and it got stuck. Egbert might have walked ahead to find help and stopped to rest with a beer. That beer bottle was the one found later. He returned to the van that night. The next morning, on July 24th, the whole family left the van, hoping to reach a government facility they believed was nearby, about 9 miles away. But they never made it. In 2009, bones were found in that area. Cornelia's remains were confirmed, and more bones were found nearby. People believe they may belong to the rest of the family, but there weren't enough remains to prove it. Most believe the family died from heat and lack of water after getting lost in one of the hottest places on Earth. They made a few honest mistakes, but Death Valley is an unforgiving place. Until all the remains are found and identified, the full story will remain a mystery. Julie Williams and Lollie Winans, Shenandoah National Park, Virginia, 1996. The Appalachian Trail is a very long hiking trail that stretches over 2,200 miles in the eastern United States. It passes through forests, hills, and other beautiful natural areas. Since it was built in the 1920s and finished in 1937, it has become one of the most popular trails in the country. Every year, more than 3 million people walk parts of it. For the most part, it is considered safe, with most risks coming from weather, wild animals, plants, and accidents. But sometimes, people can be the biggest danger. Since the trail was completed, there have been 13 known murders along it. Julie was 24 years old, and Lollie was 26. They were on a camping trip in the beautiful park with their golden retriever, Taj. The two women had met 2 years earlier at a nonprofit camp in Minnesota called Woods Women, a group that focused on outdoor adventures for women. Even though they came from very different lives, they bonded over their love of nature. Lollie came from a wealthy family, but she did not follow the traditional path. She smoked, enjoyed beer, and didn't care much about material things. After dropping out of one college, she later went to Unity College in Maine, where she studied to become a wilderness guide. Julie, on the other hand, was very successful in school and sports. She once won the Minnesota State Tennis Championship and studied dinosaurs in Europe during college. She spoke Spanish and worked with people who had been through difficult situations. After graduation, she worked at a bookstore in Vermont and had just accepted a new job set to begin on June 1st, 1996. To celebrate, the couple planned a camping trip. On May 19, 1996, Julie and Lollie set off on their hike into Shenandoah National Park. A few days later, they took a short break due to rain, hitched a ride from a park ranger, renewed their camping permit, and continued their hike. They climbed Hawksbill Mountain, the tallest in the park, and camped near a stream. Sadly, that would be the last time anyone saw them alive. When Julie didn't show up for her new job on June 1st, her father reported her missing. Rangers quickly found their car and began searching. During their search, they found Taj, the dog, wandering in the woods without a leash. Later that evening, Rangers discovered the bodies of Julie and Lollie at their campsite, which was just half a mile from a busy place called Skyland Lodge, a popular spot for tourists during Memorial Day weekend. Shockingly, the two women had been tied up, gagged, and had their throats slashed. Even though they were close to a crowded area, their bodies went unnoticed for days. Park rules said campers had to stay off the main trails, which meant they were far from where most people walked. This made them harder to find. Solving crimes in national parks is difficult. First, because the park is federal land, only the federal government can investigate crimes there. Second, parks are large and have many visitors. Third, it is hard to collect clues in the open wilderness. Sometimes it takes longer to find out that a crime even happened, just like it did in Julie and Lollie's case. For over a year, police and the FBI followed up on more than 15,000 tips, but they made no progress until something strange happened in 1997. During a bike race in the same park, a Canadian woman named Yvonne Malbasha was attacked by a man who tried to pull her into his truck. She fought him off, and he ran. Rangers caught him before he left the park. His name was Daryl David Rice. Rice was in his late 20s. He had no criminal record, but was known for being angry and aggressive. His coworkers said he yelled at them, broke things at work, and made others feel unsafe. After his arrest, police found hand and leg restraints in his truck. In 1998, Rice pleaded guilty to trying to kidnap Yvonne. He was sent to federal prison for over 11 years. But investigators also began to wonder if he was the one who killed Julie and Lollie. They pointed to a few reasons. Rice had been in the park around the same time as the murders. He had a history of violent behavior, especially toward women. He had said women were easier to attack than men. Since Julie and Lollie were believed to be a couple, prosecutors said the murders could be a hate crime. In 2001, Rice was formally charged with 4 counts of murder, 2 of them for targeting the women because of their sexual orientation. At the time, Rice faced the death penalty if convicted. However, things changed in 2003 when investigators tested a hair found at the crime scene. The DNA did not match Rice or either victim. Without strong physical evidence, the case became weak. In 2004, all charges against Rice were dropped, though the case can still be reopened in the future. To this day, no one has been held responsible for the murders of Julie Williams and Lollie Winans. Jaryd Atadero, Big South Trail, Colorado, 1999. The Big South Trail in Colorado is known for its natural beauty. It winds through deep forests, rushing rivers, and towering mountains. It's a favorite destination for people who enjoy hiking and camping, but it's also a challenging and rugged area with steep inclines and rocky paths. Even experienced hikers can find it difficult. Wild animals such as black bears, elk, and mountain lions inhabit the region. Still, many people visit every year to enjoy the outdoors. In October 1999, this peaceful place became the center of a heartbreaking and mysterious case. Jaryd lived with his father, Alan Atadero, and his sister Jocelyn in Bellevue, Colorado. They stayed at the Poudre River Resort, which Alan co-owned with his twin brother. Alan was a devoted father who worked hard and loved spending time with his kids. Jaryd was cheerful and curious. He loved Godzilla movies, Star Wars toys, and cheered for his favorite football team, the Oakland Raiders. He was always smiling and full of energy. On the morning of October 2nd, 1999, a group from the Christian Singles Network was staying at the family's resort. They were helping with chores in exchange for lodging. That morning, the group planned a trip to a fish hatchery about 2 miles away. Jaryd and Jocelyn wanted to go along. Alan was initially hesitant but ultimately allowed them to join, trusting the adults in the group. After visiting the hatchery, the group spontaneously decided to hike the Big South Trail, something that had not been pre-planned. They drove to the trailhead, parked, and began the hike. Some members walked faster, while others lagged behind. Jaryd, being energetic, ran ahead of the group. Around 11:30 a.m., 2 fishermen on the trail reported that Jaryd approached them and asked if they had seen any bears. He then continued up the trail, alone. That was the last confirmed sighting of Jaryd. Roughly 45 minutes later, the group heard a loud scream. Jocelyn later said it sounded like someone was either playing or being attacked. At that point, they realized Jaryd was missing. They searched the area frantically, but after an hour with no luck, some members returned to the resort to notify Alan. He was stunned and furious. He hadn't known the children would be taken on a hike, and certainly not into the wilderness. He rushed to help with the search. By 4 p.m., law enforcement had been contacted, and a massive search effort began. By 6:30 p.m., around 65 people were looking for Jaryd, using dogs, divers, infrared cameras, and helicopters. Tragically, one helicopter crashed due to the difficult terrain and excess fuel weight. All 5 people on board survived, though 2 were seriously injured. The crash complicated the already difficult rescue effort. For 6 days, hundreds of searchers combed the area by foot, horseback, and air. No trace of Jaryd was found. On October 8th, the official search was called off due to a lack of leads or evidence. Speculation about what happened to Jaryd varied. Some believed he became lost and succumbed to the cold. Others thought he might have fallen into the nearby Kashlapud River and drowned. Another theory involved a mountain lion attack. Although such attacks are rare, mountain lions do live in the area. However, search teams found no blood, fur, or signs of a struggle. Another theory suggested abduction, but there was no physical evidence to support that either. Everyone present was interviewed, but no clues emerged. The case remained cold. Nearly 4 years later, in June 2003, 2 hikers exploring a remote ridge over 500 vertical feet above the trail found children's clothing: a small, brand-new-looking sneaker, a brown fleece jacket with several small puncture holes, and a pair of blue sweatpants, turned inside out and torn on one side. They notified authorities immediately. Alan confirmed the clothing belonged to Jaryd. Searchers returned and found a molar tooth and a small piece of skull near the site. The remains were located far off any known trail, in rugged, steep terrain that would be difficult for a 3-year-old to reach unaided. In 2013, DNA testing confirmed the remains were Jaryd's. Authorities returned to the theory of a mountain lion attack, but several details didn't align. Jaryd's shoes showed little wear, almost no scuffing, and would have likely been torn or removed during such an attack. His jacket showed holes, but not in places typical of predatory strikes, such as the neck or torso. The inside-out pants also puzzled investigators. Predatory animals do not remove clothing in that way. Another possibility was that Jaryd got lost and died of exposure, and animals scattered his remains afterward. But again, the lack of tearing, blood, or scavenger damage on his clothing made this unclear. The Larimer County coroner issued a final report stating the cause of death was undetermined, though a mountain lion attack remained a possibility. But without definitive evidence, the case remained open. For Alan, the loss of Jaryd was indescribable. He once said it felt like a bomb had exploded in his life. He even keeps Jaryd's skull in a small wooden box at home, one of the only physical remains he has. Jocelyn, Jaryd's sister, honored him at her wedding by leaving a seat open for him, placing his Raiders cap on the chair. Every January 2nd, the family celebrates his birthday. Alan continues to visit the spot where Jaryd's remains were found. More than 20 years later, no one knows for sure what happened to Jaryd Atadero. Was it a wild animal, a tragic accident, or something more sinister? The truth has never been found. Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden, Washington, 2006. In July 2006, a mother and daughter, Mary Cooper and Susanna Stodden, went on a hiking trip in Washington. Mary was 56 years old and worked as a librarian. Her daughter Susanna was 27. They loved nature and often went hiking together. That weekend, they left home in their van, planning to hike a trail on the other side of Mount Pilchuck. But when they arrived, they worried there might be too much snow, so they changed their plan and went to the Pinnacle Lake Trail instead. This trail is about 20 miles from a town called Granite Falls and is part of the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest. It was a quiet day at the trailhead, with only a few cars parked there. Around 10 a.m., Mary and Susanna spoke to a couple who were also hiking. One person in the couple was a retired music teacher, and the other was a doctor. They planned to go further up the mountain and went ahead of Mary and Susanna. Later that day, the couple heard what they thought was thunder, but looking back, they believed it might have been gunshots. On their way down the trail, they came across something terrible: the bodies of Mary and Susanna. However, another hiker had already found them earlier and had gone to get help around 2:30 p.m. The whole family was very familiar with hiking. They often hiked together on the mountain trails. Mary's husband, David Stodden, was completely shocked and heartbroken. To make things worse, police at first focused on him as a possible suspect. This is common in many murder investigations, as authorities often start by looking at family members. David took 2 lie detector tests, but the results were unclear. He felt frustrated and angry because he knew he didn't do anything wrong, yet he was still under suspicion. On top of grieving his wife and daughter, he had to deal with being investigated. He later said that he understood police needed to do their job, but he never understood why they spent so much time focusing on him instead of looking at other possible leads. Over the years, David has worked hard to keep the case alive. He has done everything he could to try to get new tips and information. The case was even printed on special decks of playing cards that were sent to prisons. Each card features a different cold case in hopes that an inmate might know something. Mary and Susanna's case was on the Ace of Hearts. This program has helped solve many cases. David also put out ads asking for information. A few people called in over the years, including tips about someone named Aaron, who may have known something about the murders. David still hopes this person or someone else will come forward one day. At one point, police looked into a known serial killer named Israel Keys. He had confessed to several murders, and people wondered if he might be connected to this case. But the FBI later decided that he was not involved in Mary and Susanna's deaths. David has never given up. He still hopes for justice and answers. He says he hasn't heard from the investigators in years, so he started his own campaign. He hands out flyers and talks to the media. After many years, police finally gave David another lie detector test, and this time he was officially cleared. He hopes the police will now focus on other people and bring in new investigators. Sometimes new eyes on a case can see something old investigators missed. David has even worked with psychics and had people walk the trail to see if they could figure out what happened. It's still not clear why anyone would kill Mary and Susanna. Sadly, statistics show that about 1/3 of murders in the U.S. go unsolved, and only about 1 out of every 5 murders is committed by a stranger. That's why police often look at family members first. But in this case, David and his family have always been open and cooperative. Johannet, Isla, Bastimentos, Panama, 2017. Many young people dream of seeing the world. They hope to visit new places, meet different people, and learn about other cultures. For some, this stays just a dream. But for Catherine, a bright and curious young woman from the United States, this dream came true. Catherine loved to travel. She wanted to see what the world had to offer. She was excited to go on adventures, explore new places, and learn about others. She often traveled alone and enjoyed the freedom it gave her. Catherine was born to Chris Johannet and Alice Medalia. She grew up in Edgemont, a town in Westchester County, New York. She finished high school at Edgemont High in 2011 and later graduated from Columbia University in 2015. By the time she was 23, she had already visited 6 continents. She had worked as an intern in the U.S. and Portugal and spent over a year teaching English in Vietnam. In early 2017, Catherine was backpacking through Central America. She went to Panama and stayed at a hostel in a village on Colón Island, part of the Bocas del Toro region. She wanted to visit Bastimentos Island, which was close by and easy to reach by water taxi. Bastimentos is known for its beautiful beaches, rich wildlife, and Afro-Caribbean culture. Popular spots there include Red Frog Beach and Coral Key. Sadly, this trip turned tragic. Catherine planned to visit Red Frog Beach on Bastimentos Island on Thursday, February 2nd, 2017. But she never returned to the hostel. Staff became worried when she didn't come back that day. She was last seen around 10 a.m. on Colon Island. Her last post on social media was from a few days earlier, on January 28th. It was a happy photo of her in the ocean. When she didn't return, people began searching for her. Missing person posters were put up, and even Panama's emergency services shared them online. On Sunday, February 5th, 2017, Catherine's body was found near a trail on Bastimentos Island. The police said she had been killed using her own swimsuit cover-up and had also suffered a head injury. Her family traveled to Panama and confirmed it was her. The news was heartbreaking. 8 people were taken in for questioning. Her school back in New York, Edgemont High, expressed deep sadness. In October 2017, a teenager from another island, Cayo de Agua, was arrested after DNA evidence linked him to Catherine's murder. He was only 17 at the time, so his name was not shared. He was charged with sexual assault, robbery, and murder. At first, he was sentenced to 12 years in prison, but Catherine's family and the public believed this was too short for such a serious crime. After an appeal, the sentence was doubled to 24 years. Though Catherine's life was short, it was full of adventure and learning. She was curious, kind, and full of life. She went places many people never get to see. She made friends across the world and touched many lives. Her memory lives on through the people she loved and the work done in her name. The Matthias Group, Plumas National Forest, California, 1978. In February 1978, 5 men from Yuba County, California, went missing after attending a basketball game. These men, Ted Wire, Jack Madruga, Bill Sterling, Jack Hewitt, and Gary Matthias, were between 24 and 32 years old. Their families affectionately referred to them as the boys because they either had learning disabilities or mental health conditions. All of them lived at home and were closely bonded with their families. The group loved basketball and were part of a team for people with developmental disabilities called the Gateway Gators. On the evening of February 24th, they drove to Chico, California, to watch a college basketball game at California State University, Chico. They were excited, as they were scheduled to play in a Special Olympics basketball tournament the following morning. Some had laid out their uniforms in advance and asked their parents to wake them early to make sure they wouldn't miss the game. Jack Madruga drove the group in his Mercury Montego. After the game, the group stopped at a convenience store and bought snacks, Hostess pies, soft drinks, and candy bars. But instead of heading south toward Yuba City, they inexplicably drove northeast into the remote, mountainous region of Plumas National Forest, approximately 70 miles off course. That same night, a man named Joseph Shones was in the area checking snow conditions in preparation for a weekend family trip. His car got stuck near the Oroville-Quincy Road, and while trying to free it, he suffered a mild heart attack. He returned to his vehicle to rest and, during the night, claimed he saw a group of people, including men and possibly a woman with a baby, walking in the snow with flashlights. He called out for help, but the group reportedly ignored him. He later wondered if he had hallucinated some of what he saw due to his condition, but he remained convinced at least part of it was real. On February 28th, 4 days after the disappearance, authorities found Madruga's car abandoned on a remote road near Rogers Cow Camp, just below the snow line. The car had a quarter tank of gas and was not significantly damaged, although it had become stuck in snow. The keys were missing, one window was rolled down, and snack wrappers were found inside. Strangely, there was no indication they had tried to free the vehicle, even though 5 healthy young men could likely have done so. Investigators were baffled as to why they were there or why they had left the safety of the car. Despite extensive searches using helicopters, horseback teams, and ground crews, winter conditions made it nearly impossible to find clues. Desperate, the families offered rewards and even consulted psychics, but the investigations stalled. Everything changed in June when the snow began to melt. On June 4th, a group of motorcyclists exploring the backcountry discovered a U.S. Forest Service trailer at a seasonal campsite near Daniel Zinc Road, about 19.4 miles from the abandoned car. Inside the trailer, they detected a strong odor and found the body of Ted Wire, wrapped in several sheets. His shoes were off, and his feet showed signs of severe frostbite. Autopsy results indicated he had likely survived 8 to 13 weeks after the night they went missing. He had lost nearly 100 pounds and appeared to have slowly starved to death. Oddly, the trailer contained everything needed for survival: matches, heavy clothing, a butane heating system, and a year's supply of freeze-dried food. Most of it had not been used. Authorities found opened cans of food and a used can opener, items that only Wire or Matthias would have known how to use, as both had military training. The fact that Wire was wrapped so carefully in sheets suggested someone else, possibly Matthias, had taken care of him. Searchers soon located the remains of Madruga and Sterling about 11 miles from the car, in opposite directions but relatively close to each other. Both had died of hypothermia. Hewitt's bones were found 2 days later, farther downhill. His skull was located about 300 feet from the rest of his remains. He too had died from exposure. Gary Matthias was never found. His sneakers were discovered inside the trailer, suggesting he had either taken Wire's shoes or had been there and left. No trace of him was ever uncovered. No remains, no belongings, no verified sightings. Theories about what happened remain speculative. Some believe the group got lost, perhaps misdirected by Matthias, who was familiar with the area and may have suggested visiting a friend in Forbestown, an idea supported by their unusual route. Others think they were fleeing from someone or something, perhaps in a state of panic. Some have even speculated that foul play or a psychological breakdown may have occurred. Gary Matthias stands out because, unlike the others, he did not have an intellectual disability. He had schizophrenia and a long history of psychiatric issues, drug use, and erratic behavior. He had been institutionalized and once walked 80 miles after escaping from a psychiatric facility. He had episodes of violence and delusions, including one incident in which he broke into a couple's home, claiming he had to return a ring to Satan. Some family members expressed discomfort with Matthias, believing he may have influenced or even endangered the others. Investigators later concluded that if anyone had convinced the group to take a detour or made key decisions that led to the tragedy, it was likely Matthias. Even after 45 years, the case of the Yuba County Five remains unsolved. The most haunting questions endure. Why did they drive so far into the mountains? Why didn't they return to the car? Why didn't they use the available supplies? And what really happened to Gary Matthias?